Hi, and welcome to ECE 410, week 9. Can you believe it? So, this week we're talking about scaffolds for learning, instructional scaffolds, and strategies that support learning. And so, I want to talk about first, what are instructional scaffolds? What are scaffolds for learning? And these are temporary learning supports. Most people assume that Vygotsky developed scaffolds. Vygotsky actually didn't develop scaffolds. They were first introduced by Wood, Bruner, and Ross in 1976. Um, so they are not um, developed by Vygotsky, although most people equate them with Vygotsky because the zone of proximal development. So we have the zone of proximal development, and people think about using scaffolds in that zone between what a child can do by themselves and what they cannot do, but that zone where they can learn with support from a more knowledgeable other. People think that that is where scaffolds come into play, and scaffolds can be used in that space. But Vygotsky never wrote about them. He never talked about them. He just said a more knowledgeable other helps a child learn. But you can use scaffolds in that zone, in that space. So scaffolds have five major functions. They provide support. They are a tool. They extend the range or the abilities of the learner. They permit the learner to attain a task that would not otherwise be possible without the scaffold. So, and that task could be a skill, it might be knowledge. Um, but they basically, with the scaffold, the learner can attain or do something that might otherwise not be possible. And they're used selectively and only when necessary. And this is the piece this is the hallmark of a masterful early childhood teacher, is we learn which scaffolds to use and when, because not all scaffolds work for all children. And some scaffolds work in specific situations better than others. So with that, let's go into module 9. And I'm going to share my screen so we can look at scaffolds for learning. This was an interesting sandwich, an interesting visual with the sandwich and the ladder, right? Putting all the pieces together and creating a path, creating steps to support success. Okay, so there are lots of scaffolds for to support learning, many different ones. And so the readings that are here have examples of different scaffolds to support learning. So you will see here in this reading, there are all types of scaffolds to support learning that are mentioned in this article. Okay, so going through and reading in Thelen and Cliffman what the scaffolds are, Boat, Dinabel, and Bay. Scaffolds are also ways we differentiate instruction. So differentiating instruction using scaffolds are very, very similar. So individualizing, differentiating instruction, they are very, very similar. These are strategies and scaffolds that support children's learning. Okay. Embedded in this article, um, there's a video on errorless learning. Okay. Um, and so I invite you to watch that. And moving right down, the median, these are prompting procedures. Prompting is a form of scaffolding. There are many different types of prompts. So you will see as you go through the articles and there, examples, how they can be used, and talking about different forms of assistance, different forms of prompts. And you will see some of them are similar in different articles, and some articles introduce um, new scaffolds. Here is a video on scaffolding learning. And let's see, what else do we have here? We have Jennings and all. This is about using routines to support learning and how we use routines, which is often equated with early intervention. And then these are prompts. This is a chart that talks about prompts and least to most. So these are different scaffolds that you can dive into and see what you can take away. I'll show you how we're going to apply them in a moment. You also have your observation summary paper number 2. So that is due at the end of this week. And then there is an optional reading by Hampshire and Auercade. I invite you to read this if you are working with a child who is diagnosed with autism, about visually structured tasks, or if this is something that you find interesting. These strategies often work with other children as well, but again, I invite you, it's optional. There's always the note-taking form if you prefer to use that. And then here is the scaffolding learning participation task. So the first question is reflect on your learning. Describe a time when a teacher used a scaffold for learning to support you. Identified the scaffold, explain the context, the grade, the class, the topic, and how the teacher used the scaffold. Cite your source. Then I'm going to insert some scenarios first that include scaffolds that are describe children, and you can pick a scenario. There's some questions that follow. Identify the scenario and post your answers to the questions. Then I want you to reflect on your fieldwork experience for ECE 410, which is also the same classroom for many people who are in 409 or 411. Describe a time when a teacher in your fieldwork class used a scaffold for learning. It should be a different scaffold. Each for questions 1, 3, and 4, they should be different scaffolds. Describe a time when the teacher used a scaffold for learning. From this module to support a child's learning, identify the scaffold, describe the class, the age, the grade, the topic, and how the teacher used the scaffold with the child in your fieldwork classroom. Cite the source. And then reflect on your focus child. How could you use a scaffold for learning to support the child? Describe a scaffold for learning from this module you believe will support your focus child's learning. Identify the scaffold, describe the scaffold in your own words Whoops, sorry. Describe the scaffold in your own words. And why you believe the scaffold, um, explain how you would use the scaffold with your focus child and why you believe the scaffold would support the child's learning. In other words, why that scaffold and not another. Cite the source. And then in your reply to a colleague, identify a colleague who selected a different strategy for question number 4. Explain how would you would use the scaffold your colleague identified with your focus child. Why you believe the scaffold would support your focus child's learning. So I look forward to your thoughtful responses. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you in my week in review video. Be well.